everybody. This is Steve. I'm the proprietor of this YouTube channel, and I wanted to address something Trump said in his address to Congress last week. He was talking about all of these programs that Elon Musk, as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, has identified as waste, fraud, and abuse. And one of these programs was an initiative to help non heterosexual people in Lesotho. And Trump made fun of Lesotho simply because he had never heard of the country before. He laughed about being a place that no one knew of and how no one knows where it is. And all the other Republicans were laughing. And if they had known where Lesotho is, they might have laughed even more because you see, Lesotho is in Africa. And you know what the Republicans think of African countries. But where in Africa is Lesotho? Well, it just happens to be a small kingdom entirely surrounded by South Africa. So I'm thinking that the only Republican in that chamber during Trump's speech who knew where Lesotho is would be Elon Musk, who is, of course, from South Africa, and he more or less grew up next door to Lesotho. And needless to say, the people of Lesotho found this to be quite insulting. But here's the thing, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts where they've been repeating the story of Trump joking about no one knowing where Lesotho is. And I haven't heard anyone on these podcasts explain where Lesotho is. Michael Cohen mentioned it on his podcast, and he admitted that he had never heard of the country either, and so he had no idea where it was. And I think this is almost as insulting as Trump's joke. Are you telling me there aren't any Americans, or at least there aren't any Americans in independent media who know where Lesotho is? I, for one, don't know much about Lesotho. I mean, I couldn't tell you what its GDP is. I couldn't tell you what its biggest product is. I do know that they make blue jeans. I happen to own a pair of blue jeans that was made in Lesotho. And I first heard of Lesotho when I was a kid because, stamp collecting, I happen to be a stamp collector, is very educational as well as entertaining. When you start out as a stamp collector when you're 9, 10, as I did, one thing your dad does or your mom does, in fact, both of my parents did that, is buy a packet of foreign stamps from the hobby store. And sooner or later, you're going to find a stamp from a country you've never heard of. And you might find a stamp from Lesotho. I only collect US and Great Britain stamps now. But when I collected stamps from around the world as a kid, I may not have had any stamps from Lesotho, but I had a book about stamp collecting, and I still have it. It has examples of first issues, first stamp issues from various countries. And of course, the United States, Great Britain, France, Canada all issued their first stamps in the 19th century. Lesotho issued its first stamp in the 20th century, specifically 1966, which happens to be the year after I was born. You see, before it became an independent country, Lesotho was a British protectorate, and it went by the name of Basutoland. And it received full independence from the British Commonwealth in 1966. And as a protectorate, as opposed to a colony, it already had its own government, and the leader of Basutoland was automatically the leader of the newly independent country of Lesotho. Lesotho is a monarchy, so the chieftain or whatever of Basutoland became the king of Lesotho, and Lesotho is still a monarchy, one of the very few monarchies in Africa. So that's what I know about Lesotho. I may not know much. I do know that the capital is Maseru. I may not know much about Lesotho, but I probably know more than most Americans, including anti Trump independent media podcasters. Oh, and here's an old fashioned atlas. People use Google Earth now, but here's a map of South Africa. Okay, and right here is Durban, and up here is Johannesburg, and this little pink place right here, this place outlined in pink, that's Lesotho. So yeah, it's around the eastern part of the southern tip of Africa, and it's entirely surrounded by South Africa, and not too far away is what used to be called Swaziland, which is another small monarchy. And that country recently renamed itself Eswatini because people kept confusing it with Switzerland and they kept mispronouncing it Swaziland. Which is kind of funny because I used to think it was pronounced Swaziland, and I used to think Lesotho's name had accent on the first syllable, Lesotho. But again, I probably know more about Southern Africa than most people in this country. But here's the thing. I have a strong desire to live outside the United States, obviously because of Trump. But since Trump is a transactional person, and since he would want smart alecks like myself out of the country, maybe Trump and I can make a deal. I'll agree to leave the country and be one less American who's a thorn in his side if I can be ambassador to Lesotho. Admittedly, I never really wanted to go to Southern Africa, but I'm sure Lesotho would be an interesting place to go. And what's my qualification to be ambassador to Lesotho? I'm one of the few Americans who knows where it is. I even know the name of the capital city. I already mentioned it. Maseru. And they do speak English there, so even though I don't really know the local African language, at least I can communicate in English and maybe pick up their native language. So that's it. I am announcing my candidacy to be appointed U.S. Ambassador to Lesotho. What do you think, Shorty? That's great, pal.